Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gretchen and today I am here to talk about some of my goals for 2026, specifically some books that I want to prioritize reading next year. So I think that this is probably the time of year where most of us as readers will sit down and start to think about what we want our goals to be for our reading lives in the year to come, and I am no exception. I have been thinking about this a lot lately, and it's also a time for me to reflect on the goals that I made for myself this year to see where I stand with those. How well did I do? And as I was thinking about my goal for 2025, it really did start to lay a bit of foundation for some of my goals to carry over into 2026. So the major goal that I had for myself in 2025 was I put myself on a book buying ban. And I use the term ban a little loosely because there were a few exceptions. First of all, if there was a book that I needed in order to complete a long list for a book prize that I could not get through a local library, or the waiting list was just so long that I wouldn't have been able to get my hands on it prior to the winner or the shortlist being announced, I did make exceptions for that. And in all honesty, I only had to purchase a few books outright for that purpose this year. The other exception is there were some books that did come into my life. I've had some lovely viewers of my channel purchase me or gift me books from my wish list, which is always greatly appreciated. So I was able to get my hands on some newer release books that were not longlisted for any type of prizes, or I would have otherwise not had a reason to outright purchase. So thank you for those of you that did that for me. It's truly appreciated. And then the last exception for me is I did allow myself to indulge in my local library sale, but to me that doesn't count. That's kind of a write-off in my opinion. Those books are super cheap on the first few days of the library sale, and I do go multiple days because they're constantly putting out more books as they get rid of some. The books are $2 for a hardback or $1 for a paperback, and then on the last day they do a bag sale, which they give you this huge paper bag and you pay a flat rate, which I can't remember, I think it might be $10. It's either $5 or $10, and you can fill up the entire bag with as many books as you want, and it's just that flat rate. So I do allow myself to do that, and I did get a lot of books through that this year, which I was really grateful for. But aside from that, me sticking true to that book buying ban, where I wasn't just running out anytime there was a book that I wanted and purchasing it for my collection, I was really proud of myself that I was able to stick to that. And part of the reason why I put myself into a book buying ban this year, well, there's two reasons. First of all, books are expensive. It is a very expensive hobby to be a reader if you are not somebody that takes advantage of a local library and you are acquiring all of the books that you want to read by purchasing them. And then the second reason is because I have a lot of books on my physical TBR that I need to get to, and I honestly thought that if I put myself on a book buying ban, it would force me to read a lot more books that I owned to kind of get that physical TBR list number down. And I was able to do that, but not as much as I wanted to, because I do take advantage of my local libraries and I am easily persuaded to read a lot of the new releases that are coming out. So because of that, because I want to stay on top of what everyone else is reading, I am borrowing a lot of books. So a good chunk of what I read this year did come from me borrowing those copies from my library. So thinking about that, and although I was successful as far as, not purchasing the books and saving my wallet, I wasn't as successful this year with reading my physical TBR down. So that is going to be a goal that I have for 2026. So I am still going to try to really reduce the amount of books that I buy. Just because we're going into a new year doesn't mean I'm going to go crazy. I found that this past year has really worked well for me. So I'm not expecting to be doing a whole bunch of hauls or anything like that, but what I do want to focus on is really prioritizing a lot of books that I already own and getting them read. So that all being said, I know it was a very winded explanation as to why I'm doing the video, but I did go through my bookshelves and I came up with a list of books that I really do want to make sure that I get to next year. This is going to really whittle down a little bit, and I also want to say that these are the books that just immediately came to mind. There are definitely more books I'm going to be pulling off my shelves and getting them done this year, but these ones specifically are ones that I really do want to put at the top of my list and prioritize for one reason or another, and we'll get into all of those. Now, another thing I kind of noticed as I was going through my shelves is I started to see that there were two different camps of books that I was kind of separating them into piles of. And the first group that I will go over are what I would consider classics. So I have 5 classics that I want to prioritize. Well, technically 6, but we'll get to that. So I have 5 classics that I want to prioritize, and I will go over those first. And then the next grouping is more contemporary books, and not even maybe specific books, but authors that I have never read from before, that I have several books from already that I need to finally get to. So we'll talk about those after we talk about these classics. So the first book that I want to prioritize for 2026 is a book that I kind of alluded to in one of my previous videos. I did a review of Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and I have decided that I am a fan of Thomas Hardy, and there are still several of his books that I have yet to read, so it made sense to pick one of his books to read for 2026 because I have read from him over the last 2 years, and I want to keep that trend going until I finish his catalog. And the book that I am going with for 2026 is going to be Far from the Madding Crowd. First of all, I absolutely love these Penguin English Library editions. I love them so much. When I was working abroad in the UK, I bought so many of these because I loved them, and there are a good bit of them that I have made it through. I'm looking at my shelf over there. There are a good bit of them that I have made it through, but there are still a lot that I need to get to, and I needed a Hardy, and this was one of them, so I figured that this would be perfect. So at some point in time, I will get to this. I know that there is Misery May that always happens every year, and Thomas Hardy does write very miserable books, so I might wait to get to that one until May, but I am looking forward to getting to this one at some point in time. So the next book that I want to get to next year is Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. This is a book that I have previously tried to read in the past but ended up putting it down. I just wasn't vibing with it. I am a huge fan of Jane Austen. I am a persuasion girl through and through. That is the superior Jane Austen book in my opinion. And I just wasn't really getting along with this one. I just couldn't get into it, but I did only read about about 30 pages, so I probably didn't give it a good enough chance before I put it down. I will start over from the beginning because I don't really remember a whole lot about what I read previously. But yeah, this is one that I really feel like I need to finish to complete that Jane Austen chapter. I will still pick up her novellas and her short stories because I do enjoy her writing, but I feel like this is kind of the major last chapter in my Jane Austen journey that I need to get to, and it's going to be one that I make sure I get to this year. The next book that I want to get to next year is another book that I previously started that I didn't finish, and it's not because I wasn't enjoying the book. I actually started reading this book the day before I got laid off from my job. I don't know if I ever talked about this on my channel, but I did get laid off in May of 2024, and I was devastated. It absolutely gutted me, and it turned my life upside down, and it was a time in my life where I had to pick up the pieces and figure out what I was going to do. And this book is probably going to be very emotional, and it's going to make me cry, and I knew that I was just not in a good place at that time to be able to handle the emotional weight of a book like this, and that is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Zadie Smith. So I do know that I want to get to this. I loved what I had read so far. Like I said, I just didn't think that I was in a good place to properly appreciate this book for what it is. So I am going to give it a stab this year, or this upcoming year, now that I am in a much better place mentally. Next, I have and this is where things kind of go off the rails, because it's technically a fourth and a fifth book, but it's not my official fifth book, if that makes sense. So the next book that I want to read is actually part of a pair, and I am going to be reading both, or trying to read both, the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer, specifically the Emily Wilson translations for both of those. So the reason that I am prioritizing these are both books that I have read in the past, but I will always put an asterisk next to any book that I was forced to read while I was very young and while I was in school, because I don't think that I enjoyed my time with it because it felt like a chore. And also, I specifically remember learning and reading these books, and the English teacher that I had was not good. They were phoning it in. They didn't seem to care. And I remember just not getting any engagement out of the teacher. And anytime we would get into any discussions about it, nobody was allowed to have an opinion about it. It was very much structured based on what the teacher thought of the book. So it didn't feel like there was any room for us to have any opinion. And I just remember everything about that year specifically. I just didn't enjoy my time with it, and I almost went down that path of not wanting to ever pick up a book again because it was such a horrifying experience. And I know that looking back now where I am in my life, being an avid reader and loving books and stories, that this is something that I want to revisit. And not only that, but the Emily Wilson translation specifically, because I have heard so many good things about them and how the stories are much more accessible than they ever have been in previous translations. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then the main motivation that I have to pick up both the Iliad and the Odyssey, I will obviously be reading the Iliad first because that one came first, but they are releasing a movie for the Odyssey directed by Christopher Nolan this upcoming summer. I believe believe it's being released in July, and I have recently seen the trailer, and I definitely want to see that movie. It looks like it's going to be amazing. The casting looks amazing, so I'm looking forward to getting to that. And of course, I am a purist. I like to read the book and know the book inside and out prior to seeing a movie if it's based on a book, so that is why I want to pick this one up. And the last book that I think would be considered a classic that I want to get to next year is The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. John Steinbeck is an author that I absolutely love. I have read several of his books. I read East of Eden in 2024, and it ended up being my favorite book of the year. I have heard many people say that The Grapes of Wrath is actually his superior book. I cannot imagine that being the case for as much as I loved East of Eden, but I am happy to be proven wrong, so I will be picking this one up, and I know it's going to be devastating. I've heard that this is filled with nothing but trauma and sadness and just a book that will totally make me depressed, but I will make sure I hype myself up for it, and I will be getting to this one at some point in time next year. So those are what I would consider classics. And then the next ones are more contemporary, and this is also where we get into maybe not specific books that I want to read, but from authors that I want to read. And the first author or first books that I want to talk about are from Zadie Smith. So I have never read anything by Zadie Smith, and I know I am ashamed of that fact. It is sad. I cannot believe I have made it this far into my reading life, especially being a lover of literary fiction and have not experienced her writing yet. So I am changing that this year, and I will be getting to at least one of her works. Now, I have several. I have Swing Time, but I believe that I'm leaning toward actually going with On Beauty first. One of my viewers actually mentioned this book specifically in a comment on one of my previous videos that I recently did, and it really got me thinking about wanting to read it. So this is the one that I think I'm going to go with, but I could be persuaded to pick up any of her books. I just have these two physical ones in my hand now, but I also have White Teeth, and I think I have 2 or 3 of her other books as well physically on my shelf somewhere. I just couldn't find them, but they're there. So if you have any specific Zadie Smith book that you think I should start with, let me know in the comments. So the next one I want to talk about is kind of in the same vein. So this is an author that I have read from before and absolutely loved the book that I read, and I want to read more. She has a pretty hefty backlist that I am looking forward to getting through, and I have several of her books in my physical TBR, so this is just the one I was able to find, and that is Barbara Kingsolver, and specifically the one I think I'm going to go with is the Poisonwood Bible. I read Demon Copperhead a couple years ago and absolutely loved it, and once I had finished that, I started to find a whole bunch of used copies at library sales, so I collected a lot of her books. So I have several of them. This is the one I'm leaning toward. This is also the one that people say is her best work, and that is including Demon Copperhead. So I am looking forward to eventually getting to this one. This is a book that I have physically had this copy for several years. This is actually one of the books that I have had on my physical TBR for the longest, so I think it's time that we read her, but we'll see. Once again, just like with Zadie Smith, if you have any suggestions on what my next Kingsolver should be, let me know in the comments. All right, so the next one that I want to talk about, I have such reading shame when it comes to this author. I cannot believe that I have not read from her, and I have no excuse. I have absolutely no excuse. The only thing that I will say is that I am extremely intimidated by this author, and I have heard so many people say that you will never forget your experience reading from this author for the first time, so that puts a lot of pressure on these books, and I honestly don't know where to start with them. I have heard so many different opinions. I have done my own research, and there's really not a definitive answer. Everybody has their own opinion and they all pick a different book, so I'm just so confused, and it's almost like I get that thought paralysis where I just don't even know where to go. So I need your help. But the author that I'm talking about is, oh, they're upside down, Toni Morrison. As you can see, I have several of her books. These have all been acquisitions from library sales, and every time I see one that I don't have, I always make sure to pick it up. But like I said, I just don't know where to start. Which one of her novels should I pick up first? So the ones I have here are Sula, Song of Solomon, The Bluest Eye, and Beloved. But I know I also have a couple other of her books within my shelves. I just didn't see them at a quick glance to grab for the video, but please, please, please let me know your thoughts on where I should start with Toni Morrison, because it is about time. All right, so let's move on to my penultimate book. This is an author that I have never read from before, and it's an author that also has a new book coming out in January. And I know when that book gets released, everybody's going to be talking about it, everybody's going to be reading it, and I'm going to feel left out. And I do not want my first experience with this author to be with that new book. This is the book that I have always wanted to start my journey with this author on, so I am thinking that I'm probably going to prioritize this for very early in January, because his new book comes out, I think, toward the end of the month. And that book is Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. I am so excited to read this book. I do not know why I have been sitting on it for so long. People that know me, that I would trust with my reading life, have told me that I'm gonna love this, and I don't, once again, I just have no good excuse, but I am really going to prioritize it. And like I said, this will probably be, from all of these ones that I've talked about so far, this will likely be the very first one that I get to, because like I said, I want to get to it before everyone starts talking about his new novel, which I believe is called Vigil. Comes out, I think, in the States on January 27th. I could be wrong about that, but I think that that's the date that I saw. But yeah, so hopefully I can stick to my promise of getting to this one early. And then the last book. This one, This one has been haunting me for a very long time for a couple of different reasons. The first is that it is a long book. I think it's over 700 pages. It's maybe between 600 or 700. Okay, it looks like it's around 650. So it's a decent sized book. I've also heard that it is very lush and it's very informative and it's historical. So there is a lot of characters. There's a lot of history in it that I will have to really concentrate on in order to get everything out of the book. And then the last thing is that it is the first book in a trilogy, and all of the books are equally as long, if not longer. And yeah, I feel like starting this book is a commitment because I am going to want to continue that story, assuming that I enjoy it, which I don't have any reason to believe that I wouldn't. Assuming that I enjoy it, I'm going to want to continue that series. So that being said, it's almost, I'm talking about one book, but it's almost a 3-book commitment because I know I'm going to want to continue. And that book is, oh, if I put this out into the universe, I have to do it, right? So here we go. Wolf Hall. Another book I have waited way too long to get to, and I am excited. I'm scared, but I'm excited to start the journey with this one. And like I said, I don't think I'm going to have any reason to doubt that I'm going to enjoy it. I have heard nothing but good things about this book, and it's kind of one of those books that I feel like I will feel accomplished after I complete it, and then ultimately finishing the trilogy. So yeah, I'm super excited about it, and hoping that it is a fast read for as big as it is and as dense as I believe it is. I hope that it's a quick read, and I hope that it's enjoyable. I do love a historical book. I love things based on history and books that offer me an opportunity to do a little of my own research as well and learn as much about the story and the historical figures that are involved in the story. So yeah, I am super excited about this. I'm not sure exactly when I will start this, but if I can, I maybe want to prioritize this a little earlier as well. So maybe there's that possibility that I could get all 3 of the books done by the end of the year. And yeah, we'll see what happens. But that is where I stand. And of course, like I said earlier at the beginning, there are multiple books that I'm going to be pulling off of my current bookshelves that I want to read. These are just kind of the ones that I want to make a commitment to myself to try to prioritize and just let it be a jumping off point. I really do like to do that at the beginning of each year. I make a little pile. I will keep it on my nightstand because so often if you have a really large physical TBR to choose from, once again, I get that thought paralysis where I'm looking at all of my options and I just can't make a decision. And then what do I end up doing? I end up going to the library and picking something off the new release shelf. And there's nothing wrong with that, but these are books that I purchased for a reason, and I need to follow through with them, and I need to get them going. So yeah, I'm hoping that you hear me talk about all of these books at some point in time in the new year. And then also just kind of a channel update. I am working through my books that I've read for 2025 to come up with my list of my favorite reads. That video I'm assuming is going to come out close to the end of the year. I'm still working through a handful of books right now, so I don't want to make my list until I have finished all of my reads for 2025, and I don't know if there's going to be any additional ones that I'm going to pick up. I'm very close to finishing a lot of the ones I'm currently reading, and today is the 23rd, so we still have over a week of reading left for the year, so I may even be able to start a couple new ones and get those finished before the end of the year as well. So I do want to give it a little bit of time before I release my my favorites, just in case another one happens to slide into that list. And then also, I don't really have an update on my current reads. I know I have been trying to get a little better about doing updates on what I have been finishing. But right now I'm reading primarily for the Aspen Words Literary Prize, and I am planning on doing a set of videos reviewing the entirety of that long list. I think I have 3 books left to finish from their long list is a list of 15 books. I think I've read 12 and I have 3 left. So I am going to start to put those videos together. So those are kind of what is to come. And yeah, I'm so excited about wrapping up this reading year and looking forward to a new one with a whole bunch of new books and new authors and new videos. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I would love to hear if you have any books that you're prioritizing for next year, or if you have any specific goals that you are looking to incorporate into your reading life for 2026. And until we read again, bye!